Hello. So several of you have asked me to explain what these headers on the AMC math score tracking form are. If you haven't seen the tracking form yet, I talk about it in the Amy prep video as well. Basically, it's a tracking form, right? To track your progress. You can use it for AMC 8, 10, or 12. If you use it for AMC 8, ignore the right, wrong, and skip, or you can even use it and grade the AMC 8 like it's an AMC 10 for a more accurate, accurate score of what your real ability was on that AMC 8. It's up to you. You can do it that way if you want. But on the AMC 8, obviously, it's just the correct number right that is your score. So we start with the quote. What is this quote? Oh, before I continue, there is some issues with, I'm trying to record my screen and have my video in the upper right-hand corner up here, but it sometimes turns black when it converts it to an MP4 from the Zoom recording software. So I don't know if I should be using a different software. If you guys know, send it in the comments. I tried to look through forums for a while to find some resolution to this issue and couldn't find it. So if the screen does go black for a split second and it repeats what I just said, 2 seconds before, I don't think it happens that often. It happens like once per video or something. So sorry about that. Nothing I can do about it at this time. So anyhow, the quote, you should probably put a quote. If you want to change the quote, you can. I think that the quote is meant to inspire, right? It's meant to give you inspiration. People who are inspired work more efficiently, more effectively than people who are not. So you should seek to be inspired. And so this is a quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And it says, victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. So what is this saying? Well, there's two interpretations. The first one is and probably the most likely one, is that victorious warriors prepare, right? They prepare to win. They look at the strategies they're going to employ on the battlefield in advance. And then when they enter the battlefield, they've already played through, so many different iterations of how the battle might go and what they're going to do in this situation or that situation. So they're much more likely to have success than the defeated warrior who doesn't prepare at all. He just goes into battle and then seeks to win. That's the first and most likely interpretation. A second one would be that victorious warriors win in their mind. They believe they're going to win before they start the battle. Right? And then they go to war. While defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. They didn't believe they were going to win in advance. Probably no one is exactly 100% sure what Sun Tzu meant because he's not around today. 400 BC is a long time ago. And so, yeah, that's that. So moving on to the headers. The date taken, it isn't really that important. You can put the date that you took it on, or you can put the date that you graded it on. Most likely, both of those will somewhat track progress through time. What is usable? Usable is a question that you're going to answer either yes or no, Y or N to save time. And what this means is, let's say that you're going to take the test, but yesterday grandma passed away, or some relative of yours passed away, but you're a very studious student or your parents make you be one, and they want you to distract your mind from that, type of thing. And you start taking the test and you begin crying during the test or something from emotion. That's okay. We all have emotions, right? But then when you get your score, is it really representative of your true ability under normal testing conditions? No, not really, right? Were you really sick, right? You've got 102 fever because you've got, COVID-19 or something like that. Hopefully no one gets that. I'm just trying to make kind of a joke. But you have some sickness. You have the flu or something like that. Right? And so if you're sick when you take the test, it doesn't really represent what your ability would be in normal testing conditions. Your parents were driving to Vegas, let's say, and it's a 3.5, 4 hour car ride, and you get car sickness when you read in the car, but you want to get your homework done so that when you get to Vegas, you can do other things. Then is it really representative? Again, no, it's not. But for everybody else, the majority of the time, you should be putting a Y for yes. If you're putting in a no a lot, you might have a dramatic life. And so we want to avoid that kind of life anyway, but it's just there to remind yourself later. Let's say your score drops precipitously. Is there an explanation for that precipitous score drop? That's what we're talking about. What is the test code? The test code, let's say the first test you take is 2000, and I do recommend you start at the year 2000, and then you go to 2001, then it would be 2002A. That was the first year they had A and B versions of the tests. And so that's it. It's just the test code. Now, your score is going to go up, over time, or back when you first take the year 2000 test, you'll probably get a really high score. And that's because the older tests are easier. And as time progresses, they got more difficult somewhat. I mean, some years are a little harder than others, and maybe there's a fluke year that's like really difficult or something like that. But yeah, we kind of want to progress through the test normally. What is ANS? ANS just stands for the number answered, okay? If you are getting, let's give a one that you did. Let's say you answered 20, which would mean that you skipped 5, and you got 13 right and 7 wrong. This would be 13 times 6 is 78, plus 7.5 would be 85.5. That would be your score, 85.5. Your plus minus would actually be non-existent for that one. You can just put a slash. Your opening streak, we'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, let's just make one up for this person. Let's say you got the first 7 right without skipping or getting anything wrong. That's your opening streak, okay? And we'll talk more about how to do that later. If you're answering 20 questions but getting 7 wrong, I advocate that when you're preparing for the actual test that you're answering too many questions. It's okay to answer them later when time has run out, but I want your goal should be to get the number wrong down to 0 or 1, right? If it's anything higher than that, it's probably too many mistakes. You're making too many silly mistakes. You're trying to answer questions that are beyond your level, which is a good thing, and you should attempt it. But if you don't know that the answer is correct, then don't answer it. That's kind of the main thing. People ask, should I guess? Yes or no? Should you guess? I do know a student who 2 years ago thought they needed to get 1 right in order to qualify, 1 more right, and they got it down to 2 answers, so 50-50 chance. They took their chances and guessed, they got it wrong, and they missed qualifying by 1.5 points, which means if they would have skipped it, they would have got the 1.5 points and qualified for the AIME. So I don't advocate guessing for that reason. I don't think it's a good plan. It doesn't really represent your true ability anyway. Anybody could guess correctly, right? And so you're going to feel maybe a little bit less proud about it if you do get it right. Now, is there certain situations where I might, let's say you're at question 25 and you've answered the first 24 confidently and you want that elusive perfect score. And you get it down to 2 answers on, okay, take your guess, right? It's kind of cool to get a perfect score. It's really rare and it's super impressive. Okay, so yeah, there are certain situations, but in general, understand that you're gambling, right? And that's the main thing. If you understand that and you choose to gamble anyway, then I also don't want you to say, oh, I thought on number 17 the answer was going to be B, but Beauty of Math said don't guess, so I didn't, and it was B, and that would have qualified me, and I didn't make it. Okay, so that's possible too. You just have to understand that you're gambling. That's all. So you do what you think is best. My general rule is don't guess except super situational awareness that you believe it's in your best interest to guess at that point. But even then, as you can see, it sometimes backfires and doesn't work in your favor. So back to this number answered. If you in the year 2000 answered 20 and got 7 wrong, what you should probably do in 2001 is only answer 15. And the idea behind this is that you're going to reduce the time pressure. If you're trying to answer 25 questions, right, in a 75-minute test, that is 3 minutes per question. But if you're answering only 15, it's 5 minutes per question. That extra time can be spent checking and double checking answers in different ways, solving it in more than one way to get 2 different ways of proving that your answer is correct, so that you have more confidence in each answer. Because you want the number wrong to plummet down. Let's say you only got 1 wrong this time, and you got 14 right. Then your score is going to go up significantly because you would have 10 skips, and 14 right would be 14 times 6 is 60, and 24 is 84, plus 15. It would give you a 99, right? And that is an improvement of plus 13.5. Right? And so the goal, again, is to get the number wrong down low. Once you're down to 0 or 1, again, this is all in the preparatory phase. On the actual test, you should answer as many as you're capable of answering confidently. Then the next test, when you do it, you should answer 16 questions. Try to, right? Go for 16 and see if you can still get 0 or 1 wrong here, right? And then as you gradually increase the number answered, yes, the time that you're allowed per question on average will go down, but you will begin gaining confidence in yourself as time progresses, right? And so the number wrong is one of the most important things we want to focus on. Get the number wrong down as low as you can. 0 is the best, obviously. A 1 is great, not too bad. 2, okay, maybe you can still do okay if you get 2 wrong. You start getting to 3 or more wrong, and that's kind of problematic. You want to eliminate it. And so there's 2 different issues that you have to address. The first is if you are consistently getting things wrong, right, that you thought were right, that's a real problem that has to be fixed. And so when you do get this number answered down to 15 or 16, we can start to figure out if you have the issue where you think you're right, but you're wrong. Basically, the test tricked you or it fooled you, right? That is a really hard skill to teach. In fact, it's mostly innate. It's really hard to develop in a student, that skill. And you want to develop it on your own, that when you answer something, you know that it's right. That is a priceless skill on the AMC 10 and the AMC 12, and it will go a long ways to ensuring that you actually do qualify for the AIME. Because a lot of times it comes down to some strategy. It used to be, for example, that you answer 19 out of 21. That is exactly a 120. 19 times 6 being 114, and the 4 skips giving you 6 points for a score of 120, which used to be considered automatic qualifying. They did away with that around 2015 or 2016, but this used to be a strategy, and it's still a good general idea to have in mind, right? Generally, the cutoff for the AMC 10 has never been higher than a 120, right? And so you can still use this as a baseline strategy to try to approach. You know, you want to answer as many as you can, but then understand that the cutoff hasn't been as high as 120 in recent years that often. In fact, I don't remember the last 2 or 3 years if it happened or not. Okay, so you want to eliminate this thing where you think you're right, but you're wrong. And so in order to do that, we want to eliminate time pressure and then reduce the time pressure and see if you make less mistakes when you're not under as much time pressure. If that happens, then we gradually increase the number answered as time progresses until eventually you're answering, you know, as many as you can, 23, 24, 25, or something like that. And so obviously the number right is, you know, what you got right, number wrong. The right plus wrong, 14 plus 1 should equal 15. If it doesn't, then you made a mistake in how many you answered and how many you skipped. The opening streak, as I said, is how many that you get right without skipping or getting something wrong to start the test. Ideally, it would be great if you can get your opening streak to 15 or more. I mean, the higher the better. Obviously, the better, you know, it's much better, but this is a good goal, initial goal to aim for. If you can get the first 15 right on the AMC 10, right then, if you skipped everything else, you would have 90 plus 10 times 1.5 is 15. That's a 105. As long as you don't get any wrong, right, out of the 15, that's a qualifying score in a lot of recent years, or several recent years at least. So that's a good place to start as your initial goal. And then, of course, try to break your record on your opening streak. Make it go up, right? The plus minus is to track progress from test to test, right? If on the next test you answered 16, and let's say you did actually get 0 wrong, then you would get 16 right and have 9 skips. 16 times 6 being 96, plus 9 and half of 9 is 13.5. That's a 109.5, which is plus 10.5. And what I advocate is every time you set a new high score record, put a star, right? I can't draw on the screen very well. So put a star. And then if you don't set a record the next time, let's say you were only able to answer, you had a bad one. You answered 16 or you answered 17 because you increased your amount, but this time you got 2 wrong. So you got 15 right, which is 90, but you only had 8 skips, which is 12, and 90 plus 12 is 102. So now you went down 7.5, and you wouldn't put a star right here, right? So this would get a star, this would get a star, and you put a star every time you set a new personal record. Okay, so what to expect over time? You should expect your score to go something like, well, that's not good. Let's say it goes up, and then it goes down, and then here, and then it plateaus for a little bit, and it goes up. But over time, you should see your score doing something like this. It's going up over time. You can have periods of time in the middle where your score dropped a little bit because, whatever reasons, and so on. So yeah, that's what you're kind of aiming for. But as you get closer to the modern era, you might see like around 2014, it really does dip back down again or something like that. And that's fine too. The tests get harder in the modern era. Why is that? When these tests were taken in the year 2000 and the year 2001, they were actually quite difficult at that time. You have to remember at that time, AOPS didn't exist. Number one, so there wasn't as many resources. The internet was in its infancy. There wasn't a lot of access to questions and problem sets online, all of that kind of stuff. So people didn't know a lot of the shortcuts and things like that. It wasn't saturated in the math community like it is today. So when you go back and take those tests, understand we think that they were easier, but don't forget for the people who took them at that time in the moment, it really wasn't that easy. What happens is that math teachers, many of them appreciate these tests. And if they have access to them, they include the concepts that undergird or underline these, that are concluded in these kinds of problems. They include them on their school tests. So these concepts and ideas become saturated throughout all of the math community in different countries, even outside the US. And then that's why people know them so well now, because they've become common knowledge. Whereas the test taking today, like you had the Bella and Jen problem this year, where they were, or Bela and Jen, where they are, picking numbers on a number line. Something like that isn't as common, or the frog jumping around the board states. States of games are not very common knowledge at this point. And so in maybe 10 years, that's going to seem trivial to mathematicians and students coming through 10 years from now. So just understand that. So I'm going to clear all these drawings out. I hope that this helps you understand how to use this form. I will link it down below. It is not editable by you, but you can print it off. Or if you want, just make your own. That's about all I have to say about that. I hope this helps. I hope you guys are well. I'll try to get back to filming problems later today or tomorrow or something like that. I do work full time in the summer, so it makes it a little more difficult. Have a good one.